Hello everyone. You might be able to tell that I'm not driving in America. That's because I'm not. I am driving just outside Stuttgart, Germany. Porsche has brought me and some other people out here to drive the new 911 Sport Classic, but they also are giving us a wonderful day where we get to drive some of the cars from their heritage collection. Most importantly, this, the 2.7 RS from 1972. Today, I'm going to talk to you about why this car is so expensive, so important, and why it's so celebrated by both Porsche fans and Porsche themselves. Because this car is, in a way, the reason we have the GT3 RS, the GT2 RS, and basically all the GT and RS cars, and the reason they are so damn good today.
Folks, today's video is sponsored by BetterHelp, and BetterHelp is an amazing service. Let me tell you how it works. There might be days that you're feeling depressed, stressed, anxious, overwhelmed, and if you're me, it could be all of those things at once. Just this morning, I was completely overcome by anxiety and had to go outside and take a 30-minute walk before work and force myself to calm down. It is a struggle, and I have been seeing a therapist for years. But seeing a therapist is a lot harder than actually just saying, see a therapist. Sometimes they're not available in your area. Sometimes there isn't a person that you match with and you don't know how to leave them. Sometimes it's just really expensive or really inconvenient with your schedule. But BetterHelp is here to help. BetterHelp offers licensed therapists who are trained to listen and to help you. And you can talk to that therapist in a private online environment at your convenience. In fact, even though I see a one-on-one actual therapist most of the time, I've been doing it online over FaceTime for 2 years anyway, so it's really the same thing at this point. There's a broad range of experience and expertise at BetterHelp with their 20,000 plus therapist network that gives you access to help that may not be available in your area. It could be specific, it could be someone you connect with, it could be generational, sex or race-based, whatever you need to connect with to feel comfortable, BetterHelp probably has it. You just fill out a questionnaire to help you assess your specific needs, and then you get matched with a therapist in under 48 hours. You can schedule a secure video or phone session, plus you can exchange unlimited messages, and everything you share is completely confidential. If you don't like that therapist or want to change for any reason, you can request a new one at no additional charge anytime. So join the 2 million plus people who have taken charge of their mental health with BetterHelp and their therapist program. So get 10% off your first month with BetterHelp by going to betterhelp.com/smokingtire, clicking the link in the description of this video, and thank you to BetterHelp for sponsoring today's video.
Well, as we wind through this town, headed towards some more open roads, I'll give you a little bit of context. Late 60s, Porsche needed to develop the 911 to go racing in a couple of different endurance classes. So they set out on a mission that involves one of the best words in the car universe, which is homologation. Every time a car company needs to homologate a car, we, the consumer, end up with something that is far better than the other cars in their lineup, because the race engineers come over and they make some changes that make the cars better on racetracks, which just makes them better on the street. So that's what they did. Porsche brought over a bunch of engineers from the racing department. Engineers that had spent their time developing race cars came over to develop the RS. Now, this was the first time that they had done this. I know that this is a very normal thing now. We always associate the fast cars with the motorsports team, but this was the first time Porsche did it, and there's a reason they kept doing it. So they set out developing the RS so that it could go racing and so that it could win. And what they did is they laid out a target of what size tires they want to be able to fit on the car, where do they want to win, what are the rules, and then they almost reverse engineered the car to fit those goals. They got rid of a lot of weight. Some metal parts became plastic. The suspension parts got a little bit lighter. They actually thinned out the metal that the body was made out of. There's thinner glass. This is the touring model, which has rear seats, carpet. But if you get the sport model, which was cheaper at the time, and came with less stuff, it had no rear seats, super thin buckets, no sound insulation, no carpet, and no mirrors. That car was 2,100 pounds. This one is about 2,300 pounds. So the engineers put all this attention on making the car go as fast as possible without losing sight of what the 911 was for, because they wanted people to be able to buy this car, drive it to work during the week, then take it to the track. Now, as I said, the Porsche engineers had to make a lot of changes to this car for homologation, lighter weight, stiffer things, etc., etc. But one of the big things was aero, because they'd gotten some feedback from some of their 911 owners that told them that at high speeds, the back end got a little bit light, which is not optimal for anything, really. The solution, of course, was downforce, not just in the back, but also in the front. They designed a new front splitter that was built out of fiberglass, and very cleverly, if you take the front plate off, you can shove an oil cooler behind it. But the most obvious change, of course, is the famous ducktail, the wing. Now, this was not only a big deal because it was the first piece of aero to be bolted onto a German production car ever, but it was also simple, it fit with the style of the 911, and it reduced drag, increased downforce, and made the car far more stable at speed. And so, they took it racing. So they raced a little bit in 72, they did okay. 73, big year. My favorite story is from the 1973 24 Hours of Daytona. Hurley Haywood is driving this car with Peter Gregg. Hurley's driving, he's so far out in front of the rest of his field that he could have literally stopped and had a picnic, got back in the car, and he still would have won. And you'll know what I'm talking about by the end of this story. So he's ripping around Daytona, and a seagull dive bombs the car, hits the windshield, smashes the windshield so hard that part of the bill is like stuck in the windshield. Obviously, that's going to cause a little bit of a visual impairment. Going to have a little bit of a visibility issue. So, race team tells him to keep going around. They're going to try to find a windshield. The key word being find, because they had not brought another windshield. So the team walks around the paddock and they find someone who had driven their 72 911 to the race. It's a spectator. Somehow, they find this person and they say, please, oh please, oh please, can we please have your windshield for our race car? And the spectator says yes. They call Hurley in, they swap the windshield. Co-driver goes out, wins the race 22 laps ahead of the field. That is with a seagull stuck on the windshield, the time it took to find the windshield, pull in, change it, and then when he went back out, they told him to run less than race pace because he was so far in front, they were worried about him breaking the car. And he still won by 22 laps. I would say that all of the engine, engineering, and aerodynamic experimentation worked quite well. In fact, it was so successful that by the end of 1973, Porsche had won 3 international championships and 7 national championships with RSs. That is crazy. Here we go. Wow, the steering is so light. I honestly can't really feel what the front tires are doing, but it's not because there's slop in the wheel. Every little millimeter of adjustment to the steering wheel makes the front end move. I just can't feel the resistance from the tire. Then again, these tires are probably a 200 sidewall and 12-inch rim. They're very small. Shifter, 5-speed, very direct, very talkative to the hand. It feels like moving a foosball controller, you know? Incredibly precise, but incredibly easy to move. The centering spring seems to be gone, so it does move around a little bit, but I felt comfortable within the first minute of shifting this car. It is so good, so precise. The engine is a 2.7 liter flat 6, makes around 200 horsepower at 6,300 RPM, just over 190 pound-feet of torque at about 5,000 RPM. You gotta rev it out a little bit. Now 200 horsepower doesn't seem like a lot these days, I get it. Hello, Civic Si. However, this car, with all the niceties being armrests, rear seats, and carpet, with all of those niceties, it only weighs 2,300 pounds. So the power to weight ratio is actually pretty good. It's on par with something like the first generation M2. Now, with that 2.7 liter engine and the light weight of this was actually the first production German car to reach 60 miles per hour in under 6 seconds. Ooh! For a little while, it was the quickest German production car you could buy. Top speed, 151 miles per hour, 0 to 60 in like 5.8. It feels stout. It does, it feels stout. And it has that wonderful frictionless precision to it that the Porsche engines have today. I mean, this thing redlines at above 7,000 RPM, and I don't feel bad taking it to the upper sixes. There are some cars when you drive, they feel like they are mad at you the closer you get to redline, and they are really boiling over. This does not feel that way. It's been really easy to downshift. It's easy to know where the engine is in the rev range when I downshift. I feel like I can catch it so easily. I've only been driving this car for like 20 minutes, but I already feel really comfortable with the shifter placement, the shifter feel, and downshifting it. The brakes feel really good, power assisted. They grab early and up top, but they're not so rigid. Like a lot of modern braking systems, it's almost like pushing on the steering wheel. They barely move before you're at like full force. But this has a nice amount of give to it, but I don't have to go all the way to the floor. I really like it. The ride is really good. The suspension with the RS was a little bit lighter in terms of the component weight than the other 911, but it had a stiffer suspension setup and different anti-roll bars. But it's far from stiff. I mean, it moves around a little bit, but I think that squishy sidewall really soaks up the few cracks that are in these roads. So why was this car so important? Well, it has a bunch of firsts. It was the first time Porsche used a staggered stance for the wheels. It was the first time they had put aero on a car that was rolling off a production line and sold at dealerships. Not only for Porsche, but actually for all German manufacturers. The BMW CSL came with an aero kit, but it came in the trunk. You had to put it on at home. This was the first time the German government said, yes, you can sell a car with a wing attached to it. But most importantly, it was the first time that Porsche brought their motorsports team over to a production car, and they developed what would be a road car. And obviously it was so successful, both commercially and in the racetrack, that they stuck with it. And that's why we have people like Andreas Peuniger. That's why we have the GT3 RS, GT2 RS, the GT and RS program, is because they tried it once, and boy, howdy, did it work. Did it work. When you learn the story of this car, it's easy to understand why it's expensive. It's rare, it's a homologation car that did very, very well, and it's really good to drive. It's really good to drive. And I'd say it's fairly pretty. I really like the shape of the ducktail. I think it does a really good thing for the 911's aesthetic. The profile looks awesome. You know, pretty, rare, and racing history, that's what makes cars expensive. That's the formula right there. Whether or not it lives up to the hype is really subjective, and I think a lot of that is up to your bank account. You could take a 72 Porsche and build an RS replica and get a lot of the elements, because the elements, as far as from the driver's seat, are lightweight, decent power. That's really it. You know, you could put some suspension on your car, you could, you know, build the engine out a little bit and pull out some weight, and it's probably going to feel really close to this one. It won't have the thin metal or the thin glass, but it'll be pretty close. But there's something special about driving something the way the factory intended it to be, and knowing that the brilliant minds that ran the race program, you know, came down and went, here's what we think is great. And you get to drive it, and it is. So thank you guys for watching. Thank you for listening to the podcast, supporting us. We'll catch you next time. I had a stoplight in Germany.
Remember, always fight your tickets. Use code TST10 on the Off the Record app available in the Android and iOS store, or go to offtherecord.com/TST.